Hi, I'm Andrew Young. I'm the executive director of the Georgian Bay Land Trust. I've been in this role for about a year, and it's been a great year to kind of come into this organization and pick up from where my predecessor, Bill Lougheed, left off, and who did such an awesome job for the 10 years prior. And one of the things that Bill and the team had conceived of during his time here was adding more protection along the eastern shore of Georgian Bay. And so started to identify that, in fact, the eastern shore of Georgian Bay is an ecological corridor. And as many of you know, I think I recognize a lot of names on the list here. So I think many of you already know our mission and what Georgian Bay Land Trust does, but effectively what we're trying to do is conserve and steward lands along the eastern shore so that in future generations the land will look much like it does today, and the species that exist there today will continue to thrive. So tonight's presentation is really just a bit of a check-in about what we've been learning about some of the new land that we've been stewarding and researching. And we've got Adam Grottoli, who is one of our biologists, and he's the coordinator of the corridor project, to join us tonight to give a little bit of an update of kind of where we're at and some of the things that we've been learning. I had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with Adam in the field this summer. I've spent a bunch of time in backcountry situations, and normally, when you go like as on a hike, you'll cover, a 10-kilometer section in, maybe a couple hours. And I quickly learned working with Adam and his team that when you're doing the kind of work that Adam does, it actually you cover about a kilometer in maybe 6 hours, and that's because you're doing the inventorying of all of the things along the way. And it was a great kind of eye opener for me to see, and hopefully through this experience tonight, you'll have a chance to kind of get an understanding. Although I promise you, it will be a 30-minute presentation, not a 6-hour presentation. So you're going to get a bit of the cold notes. So just a bit about Adam. Adam is a wildlife biologist who has completed his Bachelor of Science from McMaster University and Masters of Science from the University of Waterloo. At Waterloo, he was studying ecology and ecotoxicology of at-risk bats in Atlantic Canada. Prior to joining us here at GBLT, he spent 3 years as a research coordinator and specialist with the Assiniboine Park Zoo in Winnipeg, where he was involved in the conservation of endangered prairie butterflies and at-risk birds, and conducted research to inform conservation efforts of Arctic and subarctic marine mammals, including seals, beluga, and polar bears. Adam's been with us for the last couple of years and is just doing an awesome job, helping us to better understand the ecosystems that exist, as well as mentoring students and supervising students that come in. So he's also actively passing on that knowledge to the next kind of wave of people coming up through the system. So we're really happy to have Adam here, and I'm going to pass it over to him. So over to you, Adam.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining in today. So nice to see so many faces there. So yeah, thanks for joining. I'm just going to share my screen here. So today, really just going to give a pretty broad overview of kind of how we're monitoring large landscapes that the Land Trust protects. And it's going to apply to the Georgian Bay Land Trust Corridor Project, which is now in its third year. So just a little brief overview of what we're going to go over. For those of you who aren't familiar with land trusts, I'm just going to give a brief introduction to kind of how land trusts operate, because it does relate to how we are going about the corridor project. So I'll talk about that and then give a little introduction to the corridor project itself, and then how we're monitoring on the corridor and the different tools that we're using to conduct our monitoring, and then how we're applying all of that information that we're gathering, and just why this work really matters overall. So just an overview of the land trust. So the land trust operates kind of between the French River and Port Severn, with most of our properties occurring in between there. It does go into the North Channel as well, but we only have a couple properties in there. Um, the land trust really we acquire land in three different ways. And once this land is acquired, it's protected in perpetuity. The first method of protection is through an outright donation. If someone wants to donate the land they own to the land trust, they are able to do that. The second way is through when we purchase lands through either fundraising dollars that we have or money within our organization. And the third way, and the way that's relevant to the corridor project, is through a conservation easement. And in a conservation easement, the owner of the lands will sign an agreement with the land trust in order to protect that land. Now, the landowner will maintain ownership over that land. However, there's a bunch of covenants that will now apply to certain parts of that land that must be abided by. That is a way in which we protect land. And those agreements are set for 999 years. So it's in perpetuity that these lands are protected. Even if ownership is transferred to someone else, the conservation easement remains in place. So those stipulations, those covenants that must be abided by on the land remain in place for the new owner as well. So the land trust has been growing quite a bit and quite rapidly recently. That's quite impressive to see. Even this little infographic here isn't correct at this point. It's now at 83 properties, and that's counting upwards even still right now. And so I just want to highlight kind of that accounts for 32,900 acres. And then 75,000, there's a plan for 75,000 acres. And there's also, we also do a bunch of research projects that I'm not going to have time to get into. But if you follow on any of our socials or anything like that, we're consistently posting about the various research projects that we're doing. So I definitely encourage you to follow any of our socials to kind of keep up to date with those. With those research projects, we're also partnering with other organizations as well up and down the bay. Okay, so the corridor project, just highlighting the area here as to where we're going to zoom in on. So the corridor project is a network of municipal road allowances. So when I say road allowances, I don't want people to get confused and think that there's roads going on these orange parts here. Pretty much all of these lands are completely undisturbed. There's almost no roads going through them at all, or there is no roads going through them. They really don't have much anthropogenic or human activity in the areas, besides some trails, some recreation areas. These road allowances are only 20 meters wide, and this orange grid of them has 110 kilometers of these 20-meter wide road allowances. Now, we signed a conservation easement with the township of Georgian Bay to protect all of these road allowances. As part of that conservation easement, we need to get onto these lands at least once every 3 years. So we have to monitor quite a large area, and many of these areas are pretty far into the backcountry. So we've already done 2 years of monitoring, and in our third year, we'll finish up the rest of the road allowances that we need to complete. And yeah, so it takes quite a bit of effort to get back into these places. What I really kind of want to highlight, though, and what the true kind of power of these road allowances is that because it's in this grid formation, it indirectly protects around 32,900 acres of land. And that's in between Honey Harbor and 12 Mile Bay Road. And so because of this grid, it's hard for to build roads through these road allowances because you're not allowed to build like a road on it. You can't develop on the road allowances. So it's kind of providing this this grid that helps protect these other areas. The way I kind of like to think about it is that rather than development kind of fragmenting the ecosystems like we see with roads and other places, this is conservation, where the conserved areas are fragmenting the development. Just to zoom out a bit more, this black area, these black lines down here are the road allowances, which I just showed you. And then we have other protected areas and First Nations that are up along the coast of Georgian Bay. And so currently, we are looking to expand the corridor project. We're working with partners, and we do have some teams on the ground doing preliminary field surveys. The specifics of those have yet to be finalized, but we want to really be connecting all of these protected areas. So that way, wildlife have a way to move up and down the coast freely without too much fragmentation happening due to things like roads or other developments. It's known that Georgian Bay is a it's a migratory route for birds. Lots of animals are need to traverse through this area to live through their various life stages. So having these connected, protected areas is quite important to protecting our biodiversity and maintaining high ecological integrity ecosystems. Okay. Now, what I've just put up is all the wetlands that are in the area. And so this is another really critical reason to protecting these regions, not just for the wildlife, but also for the ecosystems there. These wetlands perform like a critical function to filtering water that goes into the bay. And they host a lot of different organisms there and a large biodiversity of organisms. And really going to zoom out a little bit more to get a little bit more perspective on why the corridor project is so important. So what you're looking at now is the Ontario Road Network. So we kind of see just that the development is moving up from the south into these areas. It's already happening quite a bit in the Muskokas, where you have habitats being fragmented, but it's relatively low amounts of fragmentation over on the east shore of Georgian Bay. So this is really a preventative project. We're a little bit ahead of the development, which is a really good thing. A lot of times conservation is reactive, so it's really awesome to have the opportunity to be proactive about this. Again, just to highlight that we have to get to 110 kilometers here. So we're going to start talking a little bit more about the actual monitoring now. So we really need to be efficient when we're doing our monitoring. We need to have the best way to access different areas. So we're going over satellite imagery in order to understand how we need to get into these places. We need to do a lot of route planning, and we also need to use different types of technology. So when we're looking at this kind of large area, it's hard to picture how can we break this down into a kind of reasonable scale. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming if you just all think about it all at once. So breaking it down into these scales of monitoring, I find helpful to kind of help plan how we're going to be learning about the ecosystems and the animals and the plants on the landscape, and kind of how these landscapes are changing as our environment changes with things like climate change. And so I have these different scales of monitoring here, with landscape being kind of the largest scale and species being the smallest scale. So just taking a look at the landscape scale first. So landscape scale is really reliant on technology, because we need to be looking at the big picture. So one thing we can use is satellite imagery, and just thinking of things like Google Maps. So we can use special types of those satellite imagery, and we can actually work with that data in order to find things out about the landscape. But oftentimes it's not actually a high enough resolution for us to use usefully. So we need to get a little bit more detailed. If you think about kind of like a TV monitor, the more pixels you have, the more high detailed things you can see. So you want to get those really high detailed things. So what we're doing is we're using drones. And drones allow us to access a large amounts of area and gather high resolution imagery in a really, really short period of time. So what you're seeing here is the drone that we use. And this is Joey, and he is currently putting the battery in our drone so you can get an actual sense of the size of it. So it's not too cumbersome, but it moves quite quick. It goes around 60 kilometers an hour and can stay in the air for around half an hour. And so when the drone is up there, we plan a route, and the drone just immediately, it automatically will follow that route, and it'll take photos along the way. And once it's done taking all of its photos, once we have like maybe a few hundred photos, we put it onto our mapping software. And we can get an image that looks like this. So here you're seeing one of the road allowances that's had the drone go over top of it, and it's taken photos along the entire way. And then we've put it through the computer, it's stitched together all of those different photos. And so if we zoom in on an area, we can see that we're getting pretty detailed imagery here. And so with this imagery, we can even see that there's an old beaver dam here. This was the trail that the beaver used to get to its lodge, or not a beaver dam, a beaver lodge. So this was the trail it used to get there. We can even see these are white pine trees here. You can see other dead trees lying around here. And if we're taking these images repeatedly in multiple different years, we can see how our ecosystems are changing. So this is especially crucial for wetlands because they do tend to actually change quite quickly. So here's an image that was taken by the Ontario government in 2022. And it is quite different from what is there now. And so this was likely due to a change in the beaver activity in the area. So either a dam broke or a dam was built, and that caused the hydrology of this wetland to change quite drastically. So from being completely flooded to being more of a meadow, actually. Okay, moving onto the ecosystem scale. This is where we kind of get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty of how we get the work done and actually getting into the field. So at the ecosystem level, we need to be on the ground. We'll combine being on the ground with our drone imagery, but we need to get out there. So hiking to places, boating to places, hiking, boating, and canoeing to places in order to get to ecosystems such as this. So this is a fen wetland. For those of you who haven't seen one, they're really awesome and cool habitats, tons of diversity. This is kind of like a shrub fen, which is pretty unique, and you can see just how expansive it is here. There's lots of cool orchids growing in these areas. So yeah, we're getting out onto these into these ecosystems, and we can see just what species are growing there. That way we can have a finer level of detail on what ecosystem it is. And the other ones that are kind of familiar within Georgian Bay. So this is actually a black ash tree. So this is a black ash swamp, and unfortunately, the black ash has been dying off over the past couple of years because of the emerald ash borer. So we're starting to see these ecosystems actually decline in their abundance. But in tracking where they are, we can return to them and see if there's any remaining kind of black ash trees or how those ecosystems are doing. There's also another really familiar one around the Georgian Bay area are these rock barrens. They're granite rock barrens. They're quite fun to hop around on, flip rocks and find snakes and whatnot. Yeah, so hiking around on these rock barrens is quite fun. The other common thing you'll see along Georgian Bay is this wetland kind of terrestrial interface here, where you have the wetland directly meeting with these dry forests or rock barrens. And that's a really common feature, especially due to the ruggedness of Georgian Bay. So putting all of these together, we can start to use our mapping software to make maps of where all these ecosystems are and where we're finding them on the landscape. Okay, quickly going to the ecosystem features side of things. So these ecosystem features aren't really big enough to be considered full ecosystem types on their own, but they are really important to document, and they do perform critical like aspects within their ecosystems. So this was like a 2 meter large dam that we saw when we were walking. It was holding back a absurd amount of water. I couldn't find the photo of our coworker standing beside the dam, but it's yeah, he's about maybe just over halfway up this dam. It's pretty ridiculous. And another really critical feature on the landscape is this pool in the forest. And so you'll find these pools kind of all throughout the forest around Georgian Bay. And these are called vernal pools. They're ephemeral, so which means they only show up for a short period during the year, but they perform a really critical function in the ecosystem in that lots of different animals will use them. So salamanders will use them to breed. Turtles, when they're migrating around, will use them as stopover sites. So they perform a really critical function. So understanding where all of these vernal pools are and kind of getting a sense of where they appear on our landscape is important. Okay, moving to the species now. So when we're monitoring the species, we will take a photo of them. Especially if it's a species at risk, we'll record its location. And sometimes we'll even record the sound if we can't see it. And I'll show you a little bit more of that in a sec. And then we put it into our mapping software and we put it on iNaturalist. If you're not familiar with iNaturalist, it's a community platform in which anyone can upload their species observations. And you don't have to know what the species is. You can take your best guess at it. And you'll have people who will go and identify the species for you. It also has an AI function built in so that when you point your phone at something, it'll give you like a recommended species, which it thinks it is. It's not completely accurate, but it does a pretty good job. So if you're looking to get a little bit more into plants and animals, I would for sure recommend iNaturalist. Yeah, so when we're out doing species monitoring, we're looking for all the species. So we're looking for the big and the large charismatic kind of mammals that we see. There was a moose and a cub. This cub was actually one of three. It was a set of triplets. The mom was nearby at that time. But then we're also looking for the not so large and maybe not so charismatic. So this is an ebony bog hunter. It's actually a provincially rare species. And this is a marbled grasshopper. So this is a provincially vulnerable species. And so we're really looking at all of the different animals to get a better sense of the diversity in the area. Just some other animals for people. This is an olive-sided flycatcher, another provincially vulnerable species. If you ever out and hear a call, the mnemonic for it is quick 3 beers. So it's a fun mnemonic. It's an easy one to remember. It's a pretty distinct call, so it's pretty cool. Another pretty cool looking bird is this black-crowned night heron. Again, another provincially rare species. If you're looking at these eggs, you might think that they were lost or something. They just kind of look like they're randomly lying there. The bird misplaced them or something, or they rolled away. But this is actually the nest of a eastern whippoorwill. So we were walking on some rock barrens, and this whippoorwill started to dive bomb us. I thought, that's pretty strange. Better take a look around. And sure enough, after a little while, was able to spot these two like incredible camouflagers. They yeah, like if you lose sight of it for even a second, it's really hard to find it again. Their ability to camouflage is incredible, and the way they lay eggs is kind of hilarious. That they just lay two eggs on rock. It's pretty funny. Yeah, and then also looking at some of the other plant species around from the really pretty. This is a dragon's tongue orchid and a white fringed orchid. They both grow in fens. To some of the maybe less and more the more conspicuous ones. This is red top panic grass, another provincially vulnerable species. And this is the bark of black ash. So it's known for its really corky bark. So if you press on it, it kind of feels like cork, and it's got these deep ridges through it. And then some of the more common visitors you'll see around the Georgian Bay, surprisingly, is so the rattlesnake here and the fox snake here, and so many snakes and herpetofauna, so frogs and turtles. Here's a Blanding's turtle, and right beside it, it's a painted turtle. So this is a good comparison. If you're the Blanding's turtle's endangered, and the Midland painted turtle is vulnerable. So but you can see the difference here in the way its carapace looks. So the Blanding's turtle has this really rounded carapace, whereas the painted turtle has more of a flat carapace there. So that's one way you can tell them apart if you're ever unsure about what you're looking at. But really, for the Blanding's turtle, it's that bright yellow chin there. A spring peeper, one that I'm sure we'll be hearing very soon. They're quite loud in the springtime. Keep your ears out for them. I think maybe it might only be about a month away, if not less. So, a hognose snake, really cool snake to see. They will rattle their tail at you like they're a rattlesnake, but they'll also flatten out like this their snout, so to kind of make themselves a little bit more intimidating. If it gets any further than this, they will play dead, actually, which is kind of a cool fact about hognose snakes. Leopard frog, more snakes, always more snakes. Here's actually 2 milk snakes and a garter snake just under one rock. This is an eastern newt in its F stage. So the newt will come out of water and live part of its life on land, and then it will go back in the water as a newt. Ringneck snake, more snakes, and so many skinks everywhere along Georgian Bay. So yeah. Oh, and then one more. So actually, when we're flipping rocks, we're expecting to find snakes, and this was a bat under it. So this is an eastern small-footed myotis. They oftentimes will live underneath rocks, and that's where they'll hang out during the daytime while they're sleeping. So while we're also doing some bat monitoring, we'll put up some acoustic detectors. So this is another way in which we're using technology to monitor all the different animals on the landscape. So bats, just like birds, you can tell their call you can tell what species it is by their call. So when bats are using their echolocation, so when bats are calling out to search for food, we can pick up on those calls and tell what species it is using just a little tiny microphone in a tree there. And so once we've collected all these species observations, we can put them into a map. And so these are all these different photo symbols are actually observations of a provincially significant species. So we can start to build up a picture of where we're finding these species and what habitats we're finding them in. And we can start to build things like this is an example of what like a heat map would look like. So maybe is there a concentration of a certain species in a certain area that maybe we should be giving more protection to? Yeah, so really, and just like going from there, we can feed these things back into our acquisition and stewardship. So taking this data, we can try to get a better sense of where these species are living. Are they using certain migratory pathways? Is there certain areas that we should be looking to protect more? And so this feeds into our acquisition and our stewardship. Are there priority regions we should be looking to acquire so that we can protect a certain species or a certain ecosystem? And so all of these things are feeding into this. For our vernal pools, which I mentioned about ecosystem features, which are important. If we collect that data and we can find out where maybe there's more, what ecosystem types have more vernal pools, we can start to build a model to tell us where we think we'll find those in the future. And on the ecosystem landscape, looking at that satellite and drone imagery, um, where are we seeing certain ecosystems that we want to be protecting based on what species need them? On the landscape scale, when we're taking in multiple ecosystems across the landscapes, lots of animals don't just rely on one ecosystem and need many different ecosystems types. And so we need to kind of consider the mosaic of all of these different ecosystems and how they're all working together to for the animals there. Yeah, and again, just kind of why this work matters. Um, so, where are there regions that need extra protection? Are there certain species which need more attention as we're doing these species observations? Are we noticing trends in the data as we're doing this over a long period of time? Because we have to be on the ground every year. Are we noticing that maybe one species is starting to disappear? And that we should be maybe looking at giving it a little bit more attention, figuring out what's going on there. How are species being impacted by climate change or land use? So as we're making these observations, we're looking at how habitats are changing through climate change. So that drone imagery and the satellite imagery is going to really help us to see how things are being affected by climate change. And then which regions are at risk of direct human impact. So as we're out there, we are also noting all the times that we come across any human activities. And that gives us a sense of where people are kind of recreating on the land. And that will allow us to that kind of allows us to direct efforts in order to maybe protect areas a little bit more, or maybe be worried about maybe invasive species in some areas. Invasive species will get to different places, oftentimes through humans. So maybe we need to be a little bit more conscious of invasive species in areas that have more human activity. Yeah, so that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming today. I just want to thank the whole team, Joey and Hayden, who have been following me out in the bush for the past 2 years and who have been critical to doing all the work that I've just kind of talked about, and the rest of the Georgian Bay Land Trust team. As I said, we're a quickly expanding team. When I joined, we were just five. And then we now have 12 full-time staff, and that balloons over the summertime. So it requires a lot of resources to get all of this work done in order to steward all of these properties that we're in this growing organization. And yeah, and as well to the township of Georgian Bay. Obviously, the corridor project couldn't happen without them signing the conservation easement agreement with us and working closely with us to get all of this done. So I think we might have some time for questions here. Um,
Yes, we definitely do. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I've just been moderating the chat. So if you do have questions for Adam, feel free to type them in the chat and I will read them out. So Adam, the first question is from Paul, and he's wondering if there are maps available for people to view. And I think that might
uh,
have been related to the photo map you showed of locations or maybe just maps in general.
so the photo maps are not available, but all of those observations are on iNaturalist. One of the reasons we can't actually say like where all of the like species are is because some of that is sensitive data, so we can't be sharing where we're finding some of the endangered species and stuff like that. So yeah, but iNaturalist, if you go there, there is yeah, you can find it there. There is actually a phase one of the corridor project that you can go and look at on iNaturalist.
Okay. And so Ross is wondering, just clarifying. So you're creating detailed inventories of species and features from drones and satellite images and pinning them to the relevant locations on the mapped road allowances?
Yeah, so the drones have an internal GPS system. So when they take a photo, that photo is already geo-referenced, and it's not 100% perfect. So then when it goes into our mapping software, the we can use features on the landscape. So we can even use certain rocks, and that way we can get it so that the photo is exactly where it should be on the map. Does that answer the question?
I think so. And then I mean, of course, Adam's also hiking the land, so some of those observations are coming from direct experience, not just the photos, but I think so. Ross, let us know if it doesn't answer the question. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, okay, so Evan's asking, are the species level surveys you're doing standardized in any way? Or are you able to aim for a complete inventory of the corridors given the area and shape?
Yeah, so some of the surveys we're doing are, but most of them are not. They're just kind of haphazard. One of the really interesting things about this project is that we're essentially walking transects across the landscape. So we're essentially just walking straight lines because of the way the road allowances are shaped. So we're kind of able to collect this almost unbiased data set. We're inventorying every single species we see, and we're trying to get if we go to a place in different years, we'll try to go there at different times. So we're capturing the different species that might be popping up at different times of the year. So, for example, some plants will be popping up in the spring, whereas others will only be popping up in the fall. So we're really trying to get a complete inventory. As we kind of build the project, ideally looking at getting some of the more standardized surveys like breeding bird surveys or marsh bird surveys, so that we can kind of be building this long-term standardized data set up.
Okay, thanks. Wendy asks, what organizations are we feeding the information to for the bigger picture?
So a lot of that just goes into us. So we have actually a GIS technician, so geographic information systems. And so the bigger picture is kind of where are the priority areas that we should be looking at acquiring in order to achieve our conservation goals. There are other organizations that our information feeds into as well. For example, the ecological land classification, so that map that delineates all the different ecosystem types, is being used by Georgian Bay Biosphere to help with their ecosystem modeling work. So there's a PhD student that's working with Georgian Bay Biosphere who's trying to create a model that will automatically classify ecosystems based on satellite imagery.
Okay, thanks. Ian's wondering if you could share the drone specs.
um I Ian, if you message me separately, I will definitely, I think I have my email, or is my email listed anywhere, because I would be happy to share those drone specs. That might not be too interesting for people at this point, but no, I'd for sure be happy to share those along with you. It's a DJI Mavic 3. So if you want to look that up, you can. But yeah, if you want any more of the detailed specs, I'm happy to share those with you.
Okay, we'll put Adam's email address in the follow-up email if that goes out, which will also have a recording of this meeting if anyone wants to watch it again. So yeah, anyone can follow up that way. Steve is wondering if we have access to Merlin's recordings as well, in addition to iNaturalist.
Yeah, so you should have access to like, do we have it, or
Yeah, does the GBLT have access to the app Merlin's recording as well?
yeah, so we do sometimes use that. Generally our ecologists are kind of trained to listen, but we will sometimes run that if we're not sure if we're what we're hearing. Sometimes if we need to know if there's a provincially significant species in an area, we can also use Merlin to play a callback in order to get that to see that bird. Yeah.
Okay. And Jane is wondering if you're going out in the winter to check out owls, etc.
No, we don't do any winter field work. We have been recently doing some more late fall work. This past year was the first year where our conservation director, Aaron Rusak, was out netting saw-whet owls, and we had a really, really successful year doing that. Lots of owls hit our nets, and we were able to put bans on lots of owls. So it looks like the owls are using Georgian Bay as a pretty significant migratory route as they move down. But yeah, no winter field work.
Paul is wondering iNaturalist or iNaturalist Classic, what should they be using?
I think iNaturalist Classic, that might be an Apple phone thing only, and I only have an Android. If it comes up with just the iNaturalist version, I would say just go with that one. I think it has a more advanced AI feature with the new one.
Okay. I think that's the end of our questions. If anyone else has one more. Okay, clarification from Steve. Can you access recordings made by others in Merlin, similar to how iNaturalist includes locations?
No, you cannot access recordings done by others. They just have the kind of the preset ones in Merlin.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your questions. And thank you, Adam, for a great presentation. I'm just going to pass it over to Janet now, who has a few closing messages.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, Adam. As always, you give us amazing information. And thank you all who attended and asked such great questions. So, as Sarah said, this video will be posted on our website shortly. Please give it out to or link it to your family and friends because it's such great information and we want it shared widely. Next in the series, in our LandMark series, on March 26th, we have Reptile Road Mortality with Joseph. On April 8th, we have Protecting What Matters, Conservation Options for Landowners on April 8th with Jen. And on May 7th, we have Mosses on Georgian Bay with Karen. So as you did for this event, please register at gblt.org/events. To ensure that you get on the list, that you make it, and then we'll share the presentation with you. I just wanted to just give you a brief overview of 2025 because as Adam alluded to, we grew exponentially, starting with Andrew joining in January. So we closed 7 new properties last year, which was amazing. And our conservation team was busy, obviously, with the corridor project, but with new and continued scientific research. They added 2 new roles in land securement and in GIS mapping and ecology. And no doubt you've seen all the enhancements on our website, social, and overall communications. And we hired a manager of finance and operations late last fall. So it was a busy year. All to say it was a fabulous year, and we're looking forward to 2026. And our goals are to increase the protected areas to 75,000 acres. We want to protect 4 to 6 new properties. And obviously, we're going to be further progressing on the corridor project, continued research, communications, and as you all know, when you see us out on the bay, we'll have fun events on the bay this summer, which will be posted on our website in April. So a couple of new programs that we have. You may have seen our new monthly giving program called the Shoreline Circle. This is an option for donors who would like to donate on a monthly basis and contribute and just stay current with everything that we do. Hopefully you all know about the King Family Bursary. We are able to give a bursary grant to, this year it will be 2 people, 2 recipients, and that is for a project that they will do that is specific to Georgian Bay. But these submissions are due on Friday. So if you were thinking about it and you haven't submitted, giddy up, let's see what you've got, because we will be doing the judging in March, and then we'll award the winner in April. So in closing, we are always so grateful for your continued support and commitment to conservation, supporting the work on our bay, and for your tireless support in making sure that these pristine lands remain intact for decades to come. It's a very special place, as we all know, and we all have a very special place in our DNA, I think, for many of us. So we hope that we can count on your support again this year. It's easy. You just visit gblt.org/donate. What could be easier? Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for all your great questions. Good night, and here's to an early spring.